hair and nutrition. And I'll give you a little bit of background about myself and why I am doing this talk this evening, and sort of, how I've been affected by this myself, as well as, what we can do about it, and reasons why we can experience difficulties with hair and hair loss. So this is me. I'm Michaella. Hi. I'm a band registered nutritionist, and I originally became interested in nutrition as I had a chronic pain and fatigue syndrome or condition called fibromyalgia. So I had tried lots of different medications and therapies, and I was really, really struggling. I was finding it really hard to work and to just sort of maintain a normal like day-to-day life. So I thought, well, I'll try changing my diet and see if that makes a difference to me as like a last ditch effort. And it did make a really big difference. And, I'm quite often people's last ditch effort, seeing me with changing their diet and doing supplements and stuff like that. So that originally got me interested in nutrition, and I fortunately have been without symptoms much longer than I had symptoms of fibromyalgia. But I do have endometriosis and PCOS, which are two fairly common hormone conditions, which I would say keep me interested in nutrition. They keep me on the right track. So part of managing those conditions for me is a big part of that is diet, lifestyle, and nutrition. So that's kind of me. I work mostly of my day to day is one-to-one clinic work. So working privately with people, sort of helping them understand the root cause of whatever symptom or condition that they have, and helping them kind of manage that with diet, lifestyle, and nutrition, but also helping them work alongside their GP or their specialists or medications that they take. So try to kind of work holistically with people in that way. So today we're talking about hair. We're going to go over a little bit, very, very briefly, about kind of the hair follicle and sort of hair itself. And then we're going to talk about hair and the rest of the body. So not body hair, but hair and the rest of the body, so we can understand how different things that are going on in some body systems can come out and affect the hair. So it's not always just about what hair shampoo you use and what supplements you're taking, but actually understanding what is maybe driving that hair loss or hair thinning or slow growth that you have. And then we'll talk about what you can do about it from a dietary point of view, some lifestyle pointers, and some just very briefly on supplements as well. So hair health. This is a very just sort of, we're not going to go into too much detail on it, but this is pretty much what the sort of the anatomy of hair looks like. So some of the big areas that we can try and work on is around the hair follicle. And then also thinking about the sort of the aspects of the body that are involved in that, and different things that you can do to support the hair follicle itself. There's different phases of hair growth. There are 4 phases. Anagen is the growing phase, and it's usually about 90% of our hair is in that phase. And then you have catagen, which is 10 days. And then telogen, which is kind of a resting phase. It's usually about 3 months. And then exogen, which is shredding, and that can shedding, not shredding, shedding, and that can be 2 to 5 months. So obviously not all of your hair is in the same phase all at the same time, or we would just grow heaps of hair at once and then we would lose it all, and then we would be starting from scratch every few months. But we have hair that go in different phases, and there's different things that can happen to us, which can affect the phase that our hair sort of moves through. And that's going to be something that we'll talk about as part of things like COVID and physical stress as well. So hair and other parts of the body. So I use this example of hormonal health. I always like to say nothing in isolation. So what happens in one part of your body will affect another part. We're not just individual systems, we're one big system. So for example, with hormonal health, you maybe have the symptoms up the top, so maybe like irregular periods or PCOS or painful periods, but underneath that you have things like deficiencies and blood sugar, thyroid health, and digestion that are all kind of affecting how that body system is operating. And it's very, very similar with our hair health. So the way that our hair looks is usually a reflection of what's going on internally. Something that I like to sort of tell clients is that our bodies, we care. Well, I care at least how I look, but our bodies really don't care about your hair, your skin, and your nails. It's not a big priority for our bodies. So often if we find that the body's under stress, that's going to be one of the first places that it will come from, and we'll see a real difference in our hair and skin. So for me, for example, as I mentioned, I have endometriosis. And in November 2022, I had to go in for an emergency surgery. So that was very emotionally stressful. And obviously, like work-wise, that was stressful, sort of trying to rejigging everything. It was stressful to then get a diagnosis of stage 4 endometriosis, which is very severe endometriosis, and finding out that I had to then have another surgery to do an excision surgery to get it all out, because it was just an emergency, like exploration surgery, basically. And then the next operation I had was less than 3 months on from the first one. So that's a lot of physical stress and emotional stress as well. And that I really felt a big impact in that in my hair. So I was always someone who used to be at the hairdresser and they would say, oh, we're going to have to charge you a bit extra for the blow dry because you have really thick hair. And then after that, those operations, it was just no comment, just fine. So I have gotten it back to kind of where it usually was, but I really noticed a big difference in the thickness of my hair, and I felt like it was not growing back as it wasn't coming in as thick and as often as it felt like it used to. And really having that moment in the hairdresser for me was very validating that I wasn't imagining it, that definitely something had changed there. Also, not too long after having the surgery, I had COVID, and that also for me affected my hair. So now that I've been settled, I haven't had any surgeries for a year. Things seem to be kind of getting back to normal, or pretty much back to normal now, through lots of work and also time as well. So from a stress point of view, how that can affect our hair is we have something called the HPA axis. And this is a snapshot from a cortisol test that I do in my clinical work. And you can contact me if you're interested in that. But basically, you have this communication between the brain and the adrenal glands. So you have the stress coming in, and that gets a signal going between the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. And that tells your adrenals, these little glands on top of your kidneys, okay, we need to start producing cortisol and adrenaline here because something is going on. So in a short period of time, if you hear a car coming and you quickly jump out the way, or maybe you're doing something at work and you're a bit nervous about it, and you have these kind of quick moments of stress, is fine, obviously, but long term we can get into chronic stress. So for example, using myself with that surgery that I'd had, obviously it was very stressful to find out, okay, you have to come in for surgery now, and then what they found out, and then the planning phase of that, and then the physical recovery. That was not just a short, stressful moment for me. That was really months of stress. And that's a big part of what affected my hair. So when you have this kind of chronic stress going on, or you've had like a big shock, maybe you've had a bereavement, or you're going through a divorce, or you're moving house, or even happy stress, like you're getting married or you're moving house, these kind of things that you're excited about, stress is still stress at the end of the day. It's still cortisol. And it can trigger something called telogen effluvium. And it basically accelerates from the growing phase into the telogen phase. So it can affect the sort of growth cycle. So it's not so much that you kind of lose that hair. It's more just that you come out of sync of your normal pattern. And that essentially can double or triple the amount of daily hair loss. So in a way, you do kind of lose that hair, but that's what's happening behind the scenes with that. And so you're losing it much quicker than you would normally. And your body's sort of saying, oh, hold on, I need to try and catch up here. But it's got its own normal, time cycle that it has with the growth phase of things. So that can be a big part of what triggers that. And then, of course, seeing that we're losing hair, or hair is getting thinner in itself is really stressful. And then, that can kind of keep it going in that way too. So physical stress, as I said, surgery is a big one. If you've had an injury, that can be a trigger. And COVID, many people who have worked with me over the years started having hair loss or hair thinning after they'd had COVID. But it's not usually straight away. It's normally about 3 months or so afterwards. Most of our body systems actually operate on a 3-month life cycle. So things like your thyroid health and your immune cells, a lot of them are on 3 months. One of the ways that I work with people is in a 3-month block, and that's the reason why. It's because of that life cycle that so many parts of our body operates on. So it's not always immediate. It's often a few months later on that we see that change. So hormones, what's going on with your hormones can be a trigger within hair loss or changes to hair. With PCOS, we can get excess androgenic hormones, which are like testosterone. So usually with PCOS, we'd see hair growth where you maybe don't want it. So on like the chin or the sort of around the lips. But then you have thinning hair, usually is sort of categorized in this sort of area here, and usually quite thin. So that can affect people in that way. With endometriosis and fibroids, we often have lots of inflammation. And quite interestingly, that HPA axis, if we go back, so you have stress that triggers the stress response, like external stress at work and things like that. But actually, internally, if you have inflammation, that also triggers that stress response. So things like endometriosis and fibroids, there's just their sort of natural state is usually there's more inflammation going on than someone who doesn't have one of those conditions. So like for me, one of the big focuses that I have with my diet is anti-inflammatory support, because I know that with the endometriosis, that is something that I'm kind of working against every day. So that in itself can cause that stress response. Even if I'm quite relaxed, I will still have like a level of that inflammation going on. And that's the same with adenomyosis, endometriosis, things like fibroids as well. Can also lead to low iron, and iron's really important for our hair health. We'll talk about that later on. But often with endometriosis and fibroids, you have very heavy periods, so you end up quite low in your iron, and that can contribute into differences in the hair. The other sort of side of things with hormones is postmenopause and aging. So generally speaking, after you're about really the late 20s, we start to make less and less collagen. And collagen is really important for our hair, skin, and nails. We often will have higher levels of cortisol and lower sex hormones, so estrogen and progesterone, that are helpful in sort of in the hair life cycle and production there. We also have the hair follicles, which shrink as well during that time. And sometimes we can have malabsorption with aging. And that essentially can mean that maybe you're eating something that's rich in like iron and vitamin C, which are important for hair health, but perhaps you're not actually absorbing those minerals and those nutrients that well. So that can come out in the hair and skin and nails. As I said, your body, in the nicest way possible, doesn't really care what you look like. So if you're not getting a huge amount, say, of iron, the body's not going to say, well, I'm going to prioritize having hair here. I'm going to prioritize, bringing oxygen around to the brain. That's more important to your body than kind of what we look like, So when there's malabsorption going on, that can be part of the picture. The thyroid. So I've put a butterfly here, not because I like butterflies, which I definitely do like butterflies a lot, but it's because the thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland just here on the throat. And it's a really big part of like our sort of, life force and like how good we feel. It's involved in your energy levels, your sleep can be affected by it, your weight, your hair, your skin can be quite dry as well. With the thyroid, when it's underactive, we often can have hair that's quite slow to grow or is quite dry, and even can be affecting things like mood as well. So when the thyroid is a bit low, it's often a symptom that I see. And actually, when I work with people in my clinical work and they say that they have that their hair is a bit kind of dry or it's growing a bit slowly and their nails are breaking out, always will send them off to have a look at their thyroid, because actually the reference ranges on the NHS in the UK are really big for the thyroid. So it's maybe something that's been looked at by the doctor, but they're sort of, it's called subclinically underactive. So not at a point where the GP would be giving them medication, but certainly at a point where maybe someone like me would be thinking, okay, well, actually, maybe that doesn't feel that great at that level. So we can have an underactive thyroid for many reasons. One of them could be autoimmune, and we'll talk about autoimmunity shortly. But also with an overactive thyroid too, sometimes that can affect hair as well. But in my experience, it's usually underactive thyroid more so than overactive. Heavy metals. So heavy metals, we actually are exposed to them all the time. Things like aluminium, in our deodorant, we get mercury, thallium are other heavy metals that we get pretty much, very not maybe not daily for everyone, but almost daily exposure to, mercury. We often get that in different types of fish. So it's fairly easy to get these like heavy metals kind of building up, and they bind to keratins, which is a protein, and it can lead to that telogen effluvium, which I mentioned, that can sort of affect the growth rate, or sorry, the rate that we lose hair or we shed hair. So when I work with people clinically, I often will do heavy metal testing to just have a look and kind of see what's going on with them on that side of things. So this is the other side of it, is to do with the immune system. So sometimes, as I said, post-viral, so after a really big viral infection like COVID or pneumonia, sometimes I see that, or something like shingles maybe, but also with Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune thyroid condition, lupus, and then we have things which maybe you wouldn't necessarily think about with hair loss, but actually often is related. So Crohn's disease, which is to do with the digestive system, psoriasis. So sometimes if people are having the buildup sort of on the scalp, that can affect the hair, the follicles and the hair growth there. And then rheumatoid arthritis, we sometimes can see that there too. And then, of course, we have alopecia, and we have autoimmune version of that, which is, a big sort of autoimmune condition that's very much focused on the hair. So the other conditions are autoimmune sort of issues that can affect the hair, whereas alopecia is sort of one of its main sort of characteristics is hair loss. So testing. So if you feel like something's not quite the same with your hair, it's usually worth looking into the root cause, as I've said. So, you might think, okay, I know I have some stress going on, but maybe there's something wrong with my thyroid, or maybe there's stuff going on with my nutrients. So I always, as a starting point, will look at the nutrient status of the people I work with. So I'll be thinking about iron, thinking about the thyroid as well, really important. Also looking at like inflammation too, with them, maybe thinking about folate and B12, vitamin D is also associated with hair loss and hair health. So thinking about those as a starting point, I would say is like a general for pretty much everyone. But then you can start to get a little bit more specific with what you're looking into. So this is where it becomes much more unique. So we might be thinking about your hormones. So if you are, regularly menstruating, is there PCOS? Do you have other PCOS characteristics? Is there a cortisol element going on here from a stress point of view? Are there heavy metals going on? And is that contributing into sort of changes with the hair? Excuse me. So some of the products. So usually I'd be thinking about sulfate-free hair products and being quite gentle. Ren, Drunk Elephant, Living Proof, Fable and Mane, among others, are some brands that I really like. Drunk Elephant particularly is a very clean brand. Ren's actually very clean as well. So usually less is more with products that you put onto your hair, especially if you are someone who's quite sensitive there as well. From a protection point of view, it's worth thinking about like a silk wrap. I know it sounds very like kind of out there, but actually it can be really helpful. I was gonna get mine to hold it up and show you, but I couldn't find it in time. But basically it's like looks almost like a swimming cap from the sort of 50s, and it's made out of silk, and it basically protects the hair while you're sleeping, or you can get a silk pillowcase. It's actually fairly easy to get both of those things in sales or online, and they can be a really good investment that lasts you a long time, upward maybe of a year, to protect your hair. So I really noticed that for myself, even though now I've got my hair growth kind of back and thickness back, but I have very wavy, and because I've put so much color through it over the years, very frizzy hair. And I've noticed a difference as soon as I started using kind of more silk products in my at nighttime. Avoiding towel drying is very helpful, and I didn't put it on here, but also not combing your hair while it's wet is very helpful too, because the hair is very fragile when it's wet. So there was this really good visual that I saw, and someone had some like wet spaghetti, and they sort of put a comb through it and it was all kind of breaking off, versus when they did the same when it was dry and it was, you know, uncooked, and it was much sort of stronger. It was quite a good visual example. And making sure you're using like heat protection, things like that. Depending where you live, the type of shower head that you use is quite good too. When we moved from Scotland to Cambridge, I really noticed a difference as well with kind of the softness of my hair, because the water in Scotland is so soft and here is very hard. So I invested in a shower head, and I can email everyone out the one that I use if you're interested, but it actually wasn't very expensive, and it has a filter within it. And that I've noticed is also quite helpful with sort of how my hair feels also. So supplements, I don't get too specific in these talks about supplements because everyone's unique. We all have different drivers, as I've spoken about. So like I said, for me, inflammation is a massive part of why I need to kind of, or a big part of my management side of things. But maybe for you, thyroid's really important, you know, so we're all a little bit different like that. But as a general sort of overarching, a multi is usually a good bet. I like brands like Advanced and BioCare. And things like collagen is very helpful. Collagen type 2 is the sort of peptide you'd be looking for, and making sure that you get a collagen peptide and not just a collagen, which is why it's more expensive, because collagen on its own is very difficult to absorb. So the peptides are easier to absorb. And something called MSM is to do with kind of the strength within the proteins of hair and skin. And then, like I said, condition specific. So if you have something that is a condition you're dealing with, then maybe some specific supplements could be helpful for you within that. But I always say, you know, if you're doing any supplement work outside of working with me, make sure that your doctor is aware of it and that you're not sort of making a big protocol for yourself with lots of layers of supplements. You're accidentally taking something too much, or if you take a medication as well. So some key foods. So as I said, there can be individual differences like stress, your thyroid, your hormones, and I have actually done talks on all of these areas, which I have recorded as well. So if you'd like to see them, just drop me a line. I can share them with you. But in general, for your hair, key foods are as follows. So eggs are a really great one for your hair. They have protein, which is essential for hair follicle production. And then we have biotin as well within eggs, and that's essential for the hair protein called keratin. So you sometimes see products that have keratin in them, but you make it yourself as well, and it's biotin that you need that for. Also has zinc and selenium. Meat. So again, there's that nice protein, and there's iron as well. So red blood cells deliver oxygen to the hair follicles. So that's really important at keeping the hair follicles nice and happy. You can get iron from some green vegetables like spinach and beetroot, but in general, it's, you know, you get much more serving versus serving from red meat. So every now and again, having some red meat in the diet is helpful for that. But if you're vegetarian or vegan, definitely thinking about an iron supplement. And then we have berries. So all berries are rich in antioxidants, and they help protect the hair follicles from something called free radicals. So a free radical basically is something that comes through and causes like chaos in the body, and it can cause damage. And antioxidant comes in and it sort of neutralizes the free radical and kind of stops it from further causing damage. So antioxidants are, you can find them in berries really nicely and easily. It's also in other dark foods. So usually the darker a food is in nature, the higher it is in antioxidants. So, you know, blueberries and blackberries and cherries and like dark red cabbage and kale, all these like really darkly colored things are usually really high in antioxidants. Vitamin C as well is actually essential for collagen production and also helps with absorbing iron. Avocado, I would say if there's one food, if you don't eat it already, to try and get into your diet to support your hair, skin, and nails. I know we're just talking about hair, but also with your skin. Avocado has a really big impact on that. And it's largely to do with something called vitamin E, but it's also rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which are a really kind of silky, structured fat. And that's what we use on the outside of our skin cells or all of our cells. We use fats. So the type of fat that you eat is going to be the type of fats that you use in your skin production. So often when people start eating avocados, they'll really notice a nice difference in their skin. But they also have antioxidants, which not only help the follicles, but they also protect the skin on the scalp. Citrus fruit. So they have collagen, which is helpful for, they have vitamin C, which is helpful for collagen production. And the vitamin C is really helpful for iron absorption as well. It's why you might sometimes see on supplements it will say iron, even if it's an iron supplement, then it will have vitamin C added to it as well. And that's why, it's because it helps you absorb iron. And then we have spinach, which has vitamin A, which is great for hair growth, also has vitamin C and folate. It does technically have iron, but as I said, the amount of spinach that you would need to eat for your daily amount of iron is a lot of spinach. I don't know that we would be able to eat that much in one day. So I would, like I said, if you're a vegetarian, I would not be relying just on your spinach for your iron. And then we have fatty fish, which is very helpful for hair health. And a study showed less hair loss with people taking omega-3 fatty acids than those who didn't. It's also a rich source of, or a good, pretty good source of vitamin D. Vitamin D is actually like a hormone and it's pretty difficult to get it from dietary sources, which is why in the UK it's recommended that at least from October to March, everyone in the UK takes vitamin D. But it's like I said, just tricky to get just from food. So as far as food sources of vitamin D goes, it's pretty good omega-3 in fatty fish alongside the omega-3 fatty acids. And then nuts and seeds. So they have a variety of nutrients. So vitamin E, they have selenium. Selenium is also helpful for your thyroid, and you can get them as you can get selenium. The best source of that is in Brazil nuts. And we have B vitamins as well, zinc and omega-3. Soybeans have a interesting nutrient called spermidine, and has been shown in a study to prolong the hair being in the growth phase. So it's actually fairly newly sort of being looked at nutrient spermidine, but that has been associated with the prolonging of keeping the hair in that growth phase, which is quite interesting. So you can get that in edamame beans, like you can see in this photo here, and also in tofu products too. So next steps, if you're thinking about your hair and you're wanting to sort of try and understand things a little bit more, I would really encourage you to try and learn about your unique challenges, making alterations to your diet and some of the things I've touched on, but definitely thinking about yourself and like what makes you unique, why it is that you might have had some hair loss or change to your hair, and definitely looking for deficiencies. And then, as I said, maybe doing some testing or some digging around to try and understand what the drivers are for you. If you want to work with me individually, do get in touch. Part of what I do is putting together individual meal plans and supplement plans and testing and things like that. I do have budget-friendly 28-day meal plans, and I have a hair health one, which there's a discount code that I can email to you all afterwards. But there's lots of really nice recipes that have all the sort of key foods and nutrients I've spoken about this evening to try and help you sort of get them in into your day-to-day routine and get some recipes into the rotation. But they're all, really nice recipes, if I do say so myself. But they're all, they're quite, fun and they're nice ones. They're not kind of just salads and feeling boring and stuff like that. But definitely trying to, get some of those foods in can make quite a significant difference, actually. It can be really surprising and really encouraging to do that. I do have very